Welcome to the Diaspora Way. We're with Bohdan Borovets and Mr. Oleg Pritula.
Hello there, Bohdan.
Hello, dear viewers. And today, in this episode, we have two very important and significant topics to discuss. A Trojan gift to Ukraine from the Bidens. The Bidens are all those socialists, communists who supposedly pretend to help Ukraine, but in reality, they make such gifts that Ukraine somehow always suffers from. These recent missile gifts we have. Without a doubt, missile attacks were one of those gifts. It is well known that the Pentagon and Washington informed Ukraine that there would be a response. There was an evacuation of the embassy. That is, they knew what such attacks would lead to. But at the same time, by providing these missiles, they did not provide protection for the civilian population. That is, first and foremost, we need to protect the civilian population. And only then think about how to take revenge and destroy the enemy. All possible means. And this raises the question, which once again confirms that everything the Biden administration does is not in favor of Ukraine, but rather towards the destruction of the Ukrainian people. And, in general, the infrastructure and potential. The most important thing for the state should be human life. And when there is no protection, and to go on the attack without protecting your civilian cities, it seems to me that this is a provocation that will worsen Ukraine's negotiating conditions. We know that in 2 months, less than 2, President Trump will be there and he will stop the war. Why make these conditions worse? This thought arises for me in light of these events. Moreover, Sullivan, Biden's advisor, says that we are not providing weapons because there is no one to fight in Ukraine. Well, when they gave a few missiles, will this help increase the number of soldiers or improve conditions? Such is the situation. How would you describe all of this exactly, sir?
I want to say that, as always, there is a cause and there is an effect. Socialists, when they start doing something, it turns out that they only harm themselves. And then they create an imitation that they are fighting against something, meaning they are working hard. Therefore, this is always, and I call it a cancerous tumor that has spread practically all over the world. It is so entrenched that we need someone like Javier Milei with a saw, a chainsaw, to cut it all out. Therefore, this is the same situation in Ukraine. They didn't close the sky, didn't protect the people, but they gave weapons. They gave weapons. First of all, why was it necessary to talk about all this so publicly? This is just like a provocation. It turns out that Putin is just sitting watching television while Biden is telling what he will do. And our media picks this up and starts spreading it. And it turns out that Putin is warned about the impending strike. He has, of course, withdrawn all his forces. He made it so that they couldn't reach them, and the Ukrainians received missiles on their heads. This is the work of the communist socialists. And unfortunately, from the very beginning, both the administration and the president, starting with Poroshenko, they have always been members of one Democratic Party. They have led Ukraine into a dead end. And since they relied on socialist communists, then the deep state and the KGB are similar structures. They easily conspire among themselves and then suffer in desolation each time they step on the same rake. So if President Zelensky had oriented himself 5 to 7 years ago and stood on the side of light and goodness and common sense, then perhaps Trump would have been in his second term as president and there would be no war. Well, we are already discussing and analyzing why this happened. But the consequences are like this. If we delve deeper into this situation for almost 200 years, while this bearded guy with a shabby beard wrote some communist things, dividing people into those who work and those for almost 200 years. He wrote in 1848 about children who have never worked. He has always been some kind of philosopher with some scientific degrees. We already know about these scholars who know the humanities well. But why does all this end in war? Because all those communist socialist things are aimed at dividing people and then creating parties to deceive people and remain in power all the time. Initially in El Salvador, Nayib Bukele changed the country. He became a more prominent international deputy. That is an increase in international deputy. That is an increase in international deputy. First all El Salvadorian, if Bukele was the first time I saw Ukraine. Such a strong leader who was re-elected for a second term. 85% of people voted for him for a second term. Do you understand the attitude? Towards their new president, Javier Milei made such reforms in 1 year that socialist communists couldn't achieve in 100 years. And now, thank God we have America, which has practically brought entrepreneurs to power. Entrepreneurs, Donald Trump, he is an entrepreneur. He has always been in business. He was forced to enter politics because he could no longer just watch the chaos and see where America was heading into the abyss. Then Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who has created 6 of the most successful companies which young people should look up to in order to know their future and find themselves somewhere out there. And Vikram Asfami created a $5 billion pharmaceutical company. So he created a business, and it turns out that a new structure has been created called DOJ, which stands for Department of Government Efficiency. How would that be in Ukrainian? Bodan. Department of Government Efficiency. Right. Yes. Department of Government Efficiency. In principle, this department has thus become higher than the entire bipartisan political structure of America. So now entrepreneurs will dictate to people in the parties how to live in general, how to build the right relationship between a person and an official. Vivek plans to fire 75% of officials in Washington, and even those who remain will be sent across the states. And, as he said,
it's time to implant such people in various depths to reduce the connections between them so they can negotiate less and create their coordination schemes, just like in Ukraine, where they would come to Poroshenko at night and discuss.
And Trump called it, you will all go closer to the patriots, where people really love America, because those who end up in Washington are no longer about America. It's such a swamp there that any person who comes out of it doesn't come out normally with their psyche. And it can be said that these sprawling states, those masses, with those huge buildings, with those monumental...
They even constructed an incredible railway between the Congress and their buildings. A railway. Just imagine how much the bureaucracy has grown there.
And I was immediately asked, with whose money?
Yes, an underground railway, moreover.
With whose money exactly, I wonder? Perhaps...
Well, of course, with tax. I would just like to add that we should start with what a state is in general. What is the purpose of the state? The state exists primarily for one main function, to protect the civilian population. Protection, freedom of speech, protection of freedom of speech, and equal rights for all. The law is the same for everyone, and everyone must comply. Everything here in this place is turned completely and utterly upside down.
The founding fathers who created the Constitution 250 years ago, what were all their efforts for so that the state could never trample on the throat of an ordinary person, an individual. And the Constitution was made to state that rights are given to you by God, not the Constitution, not by an official. You are given the rights by God to be free, to speak freely, to do what you deem necessary.
Yes, even if someone doesn't like it, if it doesn't violate the rights of another person, even if you don't like, for example, what we are saying, that it is against Ukraine. Yes, it may sometimes seem that way to you, but we have the right to speak even if we are wrong. Otherwise, freedom of speech disappears. I apologize, Mr. Olegi.
No, so the situation is that the founding fathers created what has now grown to 450 structures within the government. And as we can see, this government has grown to 450 structures. And as we can see, this government has grown to 450 structures. And as we can see, this government has grown to 450 structures. But overall, the biggest problem is that they practically take 50% or more, and maybe plus inflation, and 70% of people, resources, money, go into their bodies and are redistributed there inefficiently. Not that they are effective, but that money is also going against the people.
We see that this war was certainly provoked by the team of Biden and Putin, and this alliance has existed since the beginning. And those who have followed our channel, we have already talked about this 100 times. Then this corruption knot forms, which is already impossible to untangle where the beginning is and where the end is. And part of this knot is in Ukraine. This is the Ukrainian government. These are exactly the same corrupt officials, criminals, who are looting the funds that are allocated. The American people and the whole world helped. And from these funds, there are kickbacks back. Biden and all these corrupt officials. And this mafia cannot be overcome until we carry out lustration and expel all these scum. I know that Ukrainian deputies have already arrived in the USA and are staying here looking for contacts to supposedly establish a dialogue and cooperation with Trump. Moreover, I know that these deputies have always been against Trump. They have changed their colors and are trying to do now.
But do you know what the problem is? They came here on whose money? On the money of Ukrainians who paid taxes. And that money will be given to lobbyists in order to reach Elon Musk or Trump or Republican senators. Because they understand that there is no point in appealing to democracy anymore. It has been annulled. They are gone. All four branches of power are with Trump. And now they will twist like snakes, back and forth, trying to squeeze through, but they will not succeed.
But this will tarnish Ukraine's image again, as all these elected people will see who Petro Poroshenko is, who conducted a campaign from the Ukrainian embassy in Washington against Trump during his last term. They know this, and there is undeniable evidence of these interventions in Congress. And these deputies are already going, and we have always been for Trump. Poroshenko, I made a deal for missiles with Trump. Well, that's a lie, and this will spoil.
Yes, to help our chameleons. Vance tweeted, for example, what do you think about taking back the money that was allocated to Ukraine? I immediately write to him, listen, Vance, first of all, who gave the money? Socialists, communists, Democrats, similar structures created on the other side, where Yermak and Zelensky are. So take those two from them. What do Ukrainians have to do with it when all Ukrainians were for common sense and basically supported Trump? They were simply not given the right to vote. And we have such censorship that people cannot fully express themselves. And it's completely pure propaganda, the narratives of the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is tied to all sorts of agreements with Putin. We have such a result. Therefore, people need to realize that Trump is the bright side. He is an entrepreneur. Elon Musk is an entrepreneur. Evgeny Kramosfam is an entrepreneur, and they became even higher politicians. All of them are a libertarian school of thought. I wouldn't even delve into any political structures, I would simply call them people of common sense. And there are such people of common sense in every country, in every city, on every continent. And people of common sense just need to come together and throw off that communist, socialist ideology and crush it once and for all, so that it is never even, I don't know, in the air. Because this is absolute absurdity. They developed technology. And the communists who created this world so that you can live beautifully, they will take from you productive people, entrepreneurs, people who work for entrepreneurs, create products. They will take 50, 70% from them. Then the authorities will create some kind of disco-like elections between two parties. And in the end, it will be a bureaucratized system that will preserve everything it has. That is, if the authorities create a disco, people simply won't pull through anymore. If 50, 60 years ago, one father worked in a family with 5 children, and they had everything, cars and houses, and he even had the opportunity to invest and didn't rely on the state. He didn't even need a pension because he provided for himself. And here they developed a barbaric system that can always be deceived, stolen from, and it all ends in war, always. Because you give unproductive people money, and all that money is then used directly against you. So I urge you that in the future, there will be situations where you will need to choose a leader for your country again. By the way, when I met with Vivek Ramaswamy, we discussed, and I told him my position on Ukraine, that I disagree with him. He said, well, Ukraine, you can resolve this issue. Choose a leader who frees your country from taxes and corruption. So, whose side is Vivek really on exactly after all? Ukrainians. He is not on the side of the rotten government, but on the side of ordinary people. Of course, all of them.
Bureaucrats, corrupt officials such as these.
I want to say something bad, and I am holding back. Bureaucrats, corrupt officials. They have created conditions where they rob you and then use your money to spread propaganda, pushing this propaganda on you with your own money, which has absolutely nothing to do with common sense. And considering that, let me tell you, as a doctor, I have long diagnosed planet Earth. On planet Earth 200 years ago, in 1848, a disease appeared, cancer, which began to spread all over the world, step by step, deceiving people. It has essentially now covered vast territories. This request tumor. Moreover, it is malignant, such a state communist, socialist, fascist system. In every country, there is a government that silences people through taxes. The government, yes, there is a government that silences all resources through the people. And then they wage some wars among themselves, and the people below suffer. This cancer has practically covered all of China completely once Russia is covered. Russia is completely closed by him. Europe in general, with that rotten Brussels, it's such a mess. They have already grown to such a level, and so many legislative acts and various regulations that any entrepreneur can no longer even breathe normally there. And they also let in illegal immigrants to finish off those people who create at least something, some product.
This globalist plan 2030, which was undoubtedly calculated for Biden to truly win, and these bureaucrats will forever establish such a world government that will absolutely impose their ideas, their globalist narratives about green energy, but Trump disrupted their plans. Rather, the American people who understood that this leads to a depopulation.
Well, I, Bodan, sorry, want to continue. Let's take America. And it turns out that Marxism and communism, socialism have covered half of America. Half. And this half of America, together with Trump, has now withstood all their terror with COVIDs, with all their gender issues, progressives, and all that nonsense that they have been pushing into the holes of hardworking poor Americans for 30, 40 years. And now America, together with Trump and plus Elon Musk and plus Vivek, has simply withstood, and this has essentially saved the world. Because if America had not stood up now, this swelling would have completely covered America, and the world would never have escaped from the clutches of those abnormal people who invented the ideology that you will work, give everything, you have no private property, you have nothing, no rights, no voting rights, you have censorship, you can't say anything. And on the other side sits some group so high that you can no longer influence them. And if there are many presidents placed around the world now, they are just puppets of the globalists. They don't decide anything at all. Decisions are made somewhere, unknown up there. So they wanted to completely seize this power and dictate some conditions from above, while people would have to fulfill them like slaves, with no chances. Therefore, Trump's victory is exactly such a turning point where the world turns 180 degrees in the other direction, and step by step will begin to heal. Now Argentina has recovered, now El Salvador has recovered, and I would very much like Ukraine to become healthy. And it has every chance, because in reality, if those state officials and old sofas didn't divide us, believe me, those guys who are currently fighting at the front, and we, who are called filth for some incomprehensible reason, we are one whole, because we want Ukraine to be normal, to have some minimal administration, and for all the money to stay with the people, and the people will sort it out themselves.